Today I'm sharing 3 techniques that help me put my own spin on some of Justine's new, very classic feeling butterfly products to get results you might not expect. And I've got a bonus card with even more techniques, so stick around for that. Let's start simple, but still unexpected. I'm going to use the detailed layer of the butterfly stencils to create a rainbow butterfly. I've masked off the right wing and I've placed the stencil on an angle over my piece of white cardstock. Then I just used my favorite 5-color rainbow of Catherine Pooler inks down that side of the butterfly, going back and forth a bit to try and get a smooth blend, but because of the pattern in the wings, you don't need to worry too much. Having my stencil and cardstock on a rotating platform like this makes blending super comfortable, since I can turn it to where it's close to my blending hand. It's pretty, right? But if I layer on the solid butterfly and come in again just along the edges with those same colors of inks, it's going to give me a really dimensional look on the wing. See? Finally, I masked off the body separately so I could use some gray ink for it. I just ripped up a bunch of old tape masks I had. I really wanted to be sure not to get the gray ink anywhere else, but it still looks a little bit like overkill, doesn't it? And I ended up with a nice clean body of a sideways butterfly. So that's a really easy way to get more from any butterfly stencil or die cut. I finished this one with a simple thank you sentiment and some clear gems from Crafty Meraki. Next, I wanted to combine the solid butterfly dies with the stencil. So I masked off a piece of white cardstock and I blended 3 colors of ink through the center of the detailed layer of the butterfly stencils. I put the tape in the center and I did the green on top, then the purple on the bottom, and then I moved the tape and masked off the ends so I could blend blue in the center. Actually, I really like this look. I think it would have made a fantastic background just like this. Very artsy and modern, especially with these bright colors. But I went ahead with my plan and I cut a solid butterfly from each color. This gave me a very pretty pattern on the wings. Again, I wanted to add a little dimension to the wings, so I blended a lighter color of ink around the edges of each butterfly. As you can see, there was no body really on these butterflies, so I created my own with a dark gray marker. I just made dots with my Copic, a big dot at the top for the head, and then smaller as I worked my way down the body. I feel like this gives the look of dimension. Then I did 2 more butterflies in the warm colors, pink and orangey yellow. To add a little shine and sparkle, I got out my Nouveau Crystal Glaze, and I ran a bead of that down each of the butterfly bodies. I sprinkled some chunky glitter over the top of the butterflies, and that'll add some fun sparkle. I backed these butterflies onto a black panel so that the colors would really pop. I figured out my arrangement, and then I let some of the wings come out over the edge, but never more than 1/4 inch, since I know that'll be the edge of my white card base, and I don't want them sticking out beyond that, or the card won't fit into an envelope. I glued some directly onto the black panel, and I popped up the ones on top with some foam dots. Then I grabbed one of the sentiments. This one stamps a color with white letters. I really wish there were more sentiments like this around. They're so much easier than embossing with white, I think. I just used my scissors to trim this down right along the edges of that solid black area, and as a final finishing touch, I ran my black marker around the edge so you won't see the white cardstock when you look at this card. Next, I did a whole lot of die cutting with the detailed layer of one of the small butterflies. I wanted some pink and some green. This was a card for my mother-in-law's birthday, which is actually today. When I'm adding ink to my die cuts, I like to flip them over and add some ink to the back as well. I don't worry too much about full coverage, just enough to be sure that you won't see any white peeking through. Then I flipped them back over and added some darker pink ink with a blending brush, just randomly over the butterflies. I know it looks like dots right now, but when you lift them up, it just gives a nice variation in the color and it adds a little interest. Then I did the same thing with the other 4 butterflies, but this time in green ink. These colors plus navy blue are my mother-in-law's favorites, so I try to incorporate them into the cards I make for her. My plan is to arrange these butterflies into a grid on my card, but first I'm going to add a little sparkle with some shimmer spray. And you thought I was going to say gold splatter, didn't you? But no, this time I painted the bodies with the gold watercolor. This gives a little more definition to the butterflies and it adds an elegant touch. No skills needed, just dab it on. And now for the navy panel, I started with Juniper mist on a white panel and then I left it to dry. Then I used the detail layer of the butterfly stencils and some more Juniper mist ink, and I blended it through all over. I'm not too worried that the images don't quite make sense because my colored butterflies are going to go over top. I just wanted to add the look of some texture and dimension to this background. Then I added the shimmer spray and gold splatter to that before I started adding my butterflies on. I have 5 pinks and 4 greens, but despite all my earlier planning, I'm actually not making the right arrangement here. And it took me gluing down 3 or 4 of them before I realized that I had mixed them up, and I wouldn't have enough to complete my pattern. Fortunately, the glue wasn't quite dry, and that allowed me to lift up the butterflies carefully and put them back down in the proper places, and I completed the pattern. When I got to the end, I was able to cut 1 pink butterfly to fill in the top corners and 1 green one to fill in the bottom. I glued it all down with liquid glue and set that aside to dry while I worked on my sentiment. I used a Crafty Meraki sentiment and I stamped it with embossing ink onto honey gold cardstock before embossing it with gold powder. I love this look. I feel like it gives the look of a metal tag. I got quite a bit of warping on this cardstock, but it seemed to flatten out pretty easily, and then I trimmed it down with my small trimmer. Before I added the sentiment to my card, I ran that navy blue panel through my die cutting machine with the butterflies on, but no dies in the sandwich. And that kind of squished it all together, giving a very realistic look of die cut inlay without having to try and keep track of all those tiny fiddly little pieces. So that's a really good trick to keep in mind. I love the subtle tone-on-tone background on this one, and I used some foam dots to pop up my little metallic sentiment strip. For my bonus card, I used up some of the extra pieces I had made when I started playing around with these new goodies. You can see the background has a number of butterfly wings, similar to what I did with the navy panel, but this time I used both layers of the stencils to give a more solid look. To allow my sentiment to stand out, I cut a layer of pearlescent vellum smaller than the butterfly panel, and I stamped the sentiment on it. I attached it to the card by using liquid glue just on the backs of the letters in the sentiment. And I finished it with my one last white butterfly die cut that I had coated with black ink. I used some black iridescent half pearls to add dimension to the butterfly's body and also above the sentiment. You can try these techniques with any similar dies or stencils you have in your stash, but if you happen to have a butterfly-shaped hole in your collection, I've put the links down below so you can take a closer look at these ones. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.